Our next speaker is my new shiny friend and co-founder of this meetup. So Natalie actually, again, non-techie, she started her career as a physiotherapist, and she's been in the healthcare industry for 10 years. And right now, she's global comms director for Medicalchain, which is applying blockchain to your health records, so the secure and transparent exchange of your health records. And she's also been a crypto enthusiast for a couple of years. She's been riding that rollercoaster ride for 2 years now, and at the next meetup, we are going to have a crypto investor to talk to us about crypto a little bit. So without further ado, I want to welcome Natalie to the stage. Natalie Furness.
Right, before I do anything, I'm just going to hand out these little bits of paper. Just because with all my talks, I like to do a little bit of research at the same time. That's what marketers do. Yeah? Everybody comfortable? Okay. Anyway, well, first of all, thank you everybody for coming. My name's Natalie Furness, and I'm going to be presenting it to you today. So, I hear this all the time. Every meetup I go to, every discussion that I have with anybody. But you're a physio. What's that got to do with technology? But you're a physio. How does that relate to marketing and communications? But you're a physio. How on earth did you get in to blockchain and cryptocurrency? Now, when I look back at why I became a physio, I realized I became a physio because I was obsessed with how the human body worked, the anatomy, the physiology, the psychology. I wanted to understand exactly how human beings worked and what I could do to help people that were in pain or had experienced an injury. So from a very young age, I was very interested in trying to fix things. But I chose human beings. Now, I practiced in physiotherapy for 10 years, and I absolutely loved it. But it got to a point where I wanted a new challenge. And for me, although I joined the technology space quite late, I could always feel it kind of bubbling away in the background. I didn't ever choose to study technology. I don't know why that was. I loved science, I loved physics, I loved biology.
I mean, I go while you're writing. I mean, I've been in IT since I was 16.
Now, I've
and
thought
I never really understood why people are like scared of joining the IT, especially if you're like, because there's people in project management and business analysis and all that kind of stuff. But when you get into the tech stuff, like honestly,
it wasn't cool enough.
10,
was
11%, like you were saying.
Now
I've had my own theories, like maybe we're scared of the men or, you know, the old school boy attitude. But the truth, I think they're more scared of us, if I'm being honest.
At that young age. So this is my first question to all of you. We've talked about the fact that there isn't necessarily enough diversity in technology, but I want to know your opinion. What do you think is the one biggest reason today in which we do not have enough women in the space? This is completely anonymous, so I'd like you to have a think and just write it down. Oh, of course you can.
One of the conversations that we've been having just before the startup was that in certain professions there is no gender imbalance at entry level. That only happens as you progress through the career. In terms of IT, does anyone know, are there not enough women going in at all?
So
or are they falling out?
I think there's quite a lot of different research studies that will say different things.
Right.
What I'm interested is particularly in the opinions of people in the room, because a lot of the work that I do is about influence and changing thoughts and behaviors. Now, if I don't understand the thoughts and behaviors that exist despite the research, we can't work at either changing those or working towards satisfying people's ideas. So this is more just a general sort of opinion scoping. we could talk maybe a little bit about the research, maybe at another session.
Sure. I mean, I go while you're writing. I mean, I've been in IT since I was 16. I've never really understood why people are like scared of joining the IT, especially if you're like, because there's people in project management and business analysis and all that kind of stuff. But when you get into the tech stuff, like honestly, it's like 10, 11%, like you're saying. Now I've had my own theories, like maybe we're scared of the men or, you know, the old school boy attitude, but the truth, I think they're more scared of us, from being honest.
But I think that's the thing. With an exercise like this, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. What matters is what you think, and you can express it in a safe place, because that's what we have here. It's a safe place where you can express things. So, although I joined the tech scene a lot later than, say, maybe the average person in the tech scene, I always felt it bubbling away. I remember when I was 10 years old and I went home to my dad and I said, "Dad, the internet's going to be the next big thing." And he nodded and smiled and said, okay. And when I went to university, outside of physiotherapy, I decided to volunteer for a PhD project. Now, this PhD project was actually in the engineering department, but I decided to go and work with them while they were tracking the biomechanics of dancers using Vicon machines and cameras and software that analyzed their movement patterns. So then we could look at the forces that were applied through specific joints, look at the data, which tells a story, and then put together a rehabilitation program or a prehabilitation program to reduce the risk of injury for those dancers. So for me, what wowed me about technology was not the data itself. It wasn't what it could do behind the scenes or the matrix. What technology meant to me was that it could be used with human beings and research to improve the lives of people and society itself. And it was at that moment in which I was taking part in that research study that I realized what great potential technology had, not only in science, but in practices like physiotherapy, medicine, healthcare, art, all sorts of things. And that was my moment that I realized how cool technology was. The fact that we were able to manipulate it so we could create little animations of like dancers doing things on video screens was also super cool. So that's my next question to you. What was your tech is cool moment? When was that moment? Think back to you realizing that you knew technology would be able to improve the world we live in today. Don't worry if you don't have one. I'm just intrigued. So we all have been interested, or we've all joined the tech industry for very different reasons. For me, I'm a creative. I love mixing with new and wonderful people that share different experiences and stories. And I love how technology brings together people from different industries and can really create things that are only limited by our imagination. So it probably won't be surprising that I'm actually obsessed with TED Talks. Has everyone here watched a TED Talk? Okay, if you haven't watched a TED Talk, please do, because without TED, I would not be here today. And it's the TED speakers that inspired me to read more into technology and innovation and how we can use technology with humans and with IoT to bring tech into the real world. Now, it was at TEDx Reading that I had my real aha moment, my moment in which I knew that maybe I wasn't supposed to be in physiotherapy. And I can remember the day like it was yesterday. I was sitting in the audience and I was watching a dress rehearsal. The speakers were getting up on stage and they were talking their talks. And there was one chap that got up on stage that I spoke to about half an hour before. And he worked for a very well-known charity. And he was a technical genius. He was in genetics and also cancer research. And he was looking at the correlation between specific genes, specific cancers, and also how to identify types of cancers much earlier using artificial intelligence. And off stage, when I was speaking to him, amazing. And I watched him on stage. And rather than having this nice, relaxed energy that he had speaking to me in the audience, he was quite tense. He held the clicker in a way that was like a pointer. So he wasn't actually able to change his slides. He passed this stress onto the audience. And I knew how smart he was. I knew that there would be a better way to help him tell his story. So I pulled him aside and I used movement patterning just to relax him a little bit. I talked to him about the speed of his voice and using pauses to collect your thoughts. Engaging with particular members of the audience. And he got up on the next day and he just shone. And I was just so, so proud. And it was at that moment that I realized what I wanted to do is I wanted to help smart innovators communicate their story. And it was at that time that I met the co-founders of Medicalchain. Interestingly, I interviewed them first. And they ended up asking me if I would come and work with them. So Medicalchain is a blockchain technology company in which they are providing a platform to give patients back their healthcare data. So you would be able to carry your data around with you, access your healthcare records, and share your healthcare records with whoever you choose to for whichever period of time you choose to. And you, as the patient, are fully in control. I'm sure everybody's heard even yesterday about the breaches that the NHS had with some of their data and the issues with the communication of records from department to department. So what Medicalchain is doing is trying to solve that problem by empowering patients with their own data. Now, I looked into them and I read their story and I saw that they were run by a CEO who was also a doctor in the NHS. And I was like, wow, these guys are amazing. And they asked me to interview for their communications director role. And I was like, wow, this is the first time that I have not just been called a physiotherapist. Someone has somehow managed to be able to see past this physio exterior and actually think about some of the skills that I would be able to offer. So I took them up on the offer, and I have to say I was excited but also scared at the same time. You know, the average person does change their career maybe 3 to 5 times in their lifetime, but I'd never done it this dramatically. So what I did is I thought back to the one thing that really meant something to me, and you'll have to excuse me for this quote because it is often overused in presentations, but I genuinely believe if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Now, for someone that didn't really understand the word blockchain, I kind of set myself a very difficult challenge. Because whilst I'll tell other people this, I also have to acknowledge it myself. So I did what anybody else would do entering a new industry. And I read, and I read, and I read, and I watched YouTube videos, and I went onto Code Academy and started learning the theory of programming. I spoke to as many people as I could on the industry. I added people on Twitter. I started looking for where the communities were. And in the blockchain world, they're on places like Telegram, or if you want to speak to a Chinese person, WeChat, or in Korea, Kaiko, or Reddit. Hands up here who's got a Reddit account? Okay. If you haven't got a Reddit account, go and get one. You know, it's a great place just to Reddit. Yeah? Reddit. Yeah, it's a great place to start reading about people's ideas and opinions in the space. So I collected and I collected and I collected information to try and build my foundation. And I realized when I was in Medicalchain for a little while that I was actually using a strategy that was very similar to my physiotherapy learning. And I started thinking about how I learned as a physiotherapist, and then actually how that correlated for me learning in marketing and communications for technology. So, looking back at my physiotherapy career, I can think of my time at university, which was understanding the anatomy and physiology of human beings. Yeah, and then maybe in the later years, we were looking at learning how to apply the principles of treatment to people. And then finally, we were looking at understanding the individual that you wish to treat so you can motivate every patient to engage in their rehabilitation. And actually, out of my whole 10 years of practice, I would say that whilst I needed these basics, this was the most important thing here. So now let's look at it in terms of technology. So like I said, I would always suggest if you are creative and you're wanting to go into marketing and communications in any sense, please do seek to understand the technology prior to creating a narrative, because this could potentially be factually incorrect. I'm very lucky. I've managed to expand my network to attract a lot of technical people, data scientists, programmers, engineers, coders, heads of IT, you know, and I've listened and I've learned from these people. And you can all do that today. You're all here in the same room. You can learn from each other. So if it is an industry that you're interested in, please do reach out and speak to technical people. Please don't be scared by the fact that they might not want to speak to you to start with. They take a little bit of grinding down sometimes, but eventually they'll get there. Beer helps sometimes. So, oh no, back. So, once you have got an understanding of the technology that you are working with, whether it be blockchain, AI, machine learning, data science, the next thing you need to do is learn the principles of how this could impact your target market group. Yeah? This is the same thing as learning the principles of treatment and how that could affect your target patient group. You have to really understand the people that you want to use your technology, because you can create amazing tech that's sophisticated, that's secure, that does everything you want it to do, but it's not user-friendly and no one will use it. Or it's not targeted at the right people that might potentially use your technology. So you need to think about that. The final thing is creating a narrative that resonates with individuals or your segmented audience. So when I look at this from a patient's point of view, when I was a physio, I remember one particular patient who came in who believed that no one was ever listening to him, and that all the doctors had, written him off and he was never going to get any better. And I changed my tact a little bit with him. I explained to him a few things that no one had explained in that way before. And I asked him what he wants and what he thought about things. Now, if you pick a market that you want to attract or communicate with, you need to understand them. Once you understand them, you can then tell them your story. The story that you want to share. Doesn't matter what your company is, you will have that story there. So, what's your story? Do you run a company? Do you want to improve the people that are signing up to being placed? Do they want to hear a certain thing? Do you want to gain more clients that are going to be using your software? Do you want to be able to market yourself better to a particular target audience? Stories are very important when it comes to technology. And I'd like to ask all the techies out there to please be patient with us marketing and communications people. We really want to understand what you do. And I really want to say to all the communications, creatives, marketing people, your creativity is your strength. With techies, creatives, and business people together, we're only going to create technology that's going to improve the world. Because diversity is what's going to propel us forwards. Thank you.